Hogwarts, Muggle Fraudster Outshines Wizards with Deception. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 16, Deception? No, I didn't say it was the Deathly Hallows Elder Wand. I kept saying it was the Elderberry Wand, did I? In fact, it is indeed made of elderberry, with the tail feathers of the Night Sword. It is a very powerful wand, but unfortunately it is not very stable and it is difficult to find the owner. Ollivander shrugged. This old fellow is not as kind as he seems. Lewis looked at Ollivander's regretful expression to confirm the matter. Reflecting the truth and falsehood with each other to achieve a clear conscience, this old guy is also a master of deception. Anyway, this wand does match me, I should be fine buying it, right? Lewis wasn't going to say anything more to the old fox. Oh, no problem, thanks for your patronage, 15 galleons. Ollivander nodded and looked at Harry again, your 7 galleons. Wait, why is mine so expensive? Could it be that the night chi is less common than the phoenix? Lewis shouted after hearing this. It's not about cost, you can go and inquire, no wand maker can make this kind of usable elderberry wand like me, it's rare, that's enough. Ollivander smiled, it's a manual fee, count you out. Lewis felt that what Ollivander said made sense. Obediently handing over Garin, who was twice as expensive as Harry, the four walked out of the wand shop together. After seeing the customers leaving, Ollivander cleaned up the messy shop alone. He waved his hand, the wand boxes and wands scattered on the ground floated up, obediently found his place and drilled back, and after a while, the messy shop was restored to tidy. 2 wand boxes were left on the bench, and Ollivander put away the wand box that belonged to Harry and picked up the wand box that belonged to Lewis. On the top of the wand box is written a less conspicuous word, trial, unfinished. How interesting, Mr. Ollivander smiled on his old face, wrinkled like chrysanthemums blooming. A wand without a wick can also resonate with a wizard? Are you kidding? He shook his head and burned the wand box. Forget it, an interesting child may be able to perform differently. Outside the wand shop, Lewis, who had not been able to wait for the system prompt, looked at the sign with the gold letters falling off above his head, and looked down at the wand in his hand. Didn't you lie? He blinked and whispered to himself, what's the problem? Just now at the Ollivander wand shop, Lewis was performing a magic trick that would make a muggle resonate with the wand in the eyes of everyone. But not getting systematic feedback means that the performance has been seen through. Whether or not the people who saw through it publicized it, the scam failed, so Lewis did not receive fraud points from Harry, Hagrid, and Mr. Wilson. The system will give feedback on each successful fraud, and as long as the scam is completed, you can judge whether your scam is successful based on the feedback from the system. As for admission, although Hagrid was deceived, he was only part of Lewis's whole mixed into Hogwarts scam, so he will not settle until he officially receives the letter of admission. But the wand shop thing is clearly not this long-term operation. This scam targets Ollivander, making him believe that he is holding a wand and getting the wand to acknowledge as the purpose of the scam, but apparently, because of a certain link problem, Ollivander is not fooled. It's a bit troublesome, but he didn't debunk himself on the spot, so there shouldn't be any problem. Lewis thought. After buying his wand, Hagrid took Harry and Wilson to the owl shop. He gave Harry a snow-white owl, named Hedwig by the delighted Harry, a magical creature that was more endearing and obedient than ordinary close relatives. Do you have to have an owl to go to Hogwarts? Mr. Wilson asked while teasing an owl in the shop with a mouse stem. Mr. Wilson still had an impression of the owl disaster at the neighbor's house opposite, which made him have some psychological shadows. Or you can choose a cat, or a toad, the limit is not very big, but there always needs to be one. Hagrid said. The owl's words are very appropriate, it can deliver letters, so that Lewis can contact you at any time at school. Can't you use a cell phone or a phone? Mr. Wilson asked. I don't know what a cell phone is, but Hogwarts can't use Muggle appliances. Hagrid explained. Oh, it's not very convenient, forget it, let's buy an owl. Mr. Wilson said to Lewis. Finally, Lewis chose a brownish-yellow eagle owl with black-brown feathers as his companion at Hagrid's recommendation. How others choose owls, Lewis doesn't know, he picks the biggest one anyway. At this point, Lewis's purpose of coming to Diagon Alley has basically been achieved, and he can go back at this time. Although Mr. Wilson is still a little reluctant, he still feels that he has a lot of things he has not seen, although this magical world is backward, but its mystery is like the taste of old wine, which makes people want to stop. It's a pity that the father and son who sneaked out must go back, and Mrs. Wilson, who gets up and finds that neither father and son are at home and has left only a note, should be furious. At the Leaky Cauldron, Lewis confirmed the letter of admission to Hagrid again before leaving, and Hagrid assured Lewis that he had written a letter to Headmaster Dumbledore. Rest assured, Professor Dumbledore is very reliable, he will solve everything. Hagrid said. Hagrid had a superstitious trust in Dumbledore and always thought he was omnipotent. Episode 17, Quilinus Quirrell, and the legendary Dark Lord Voldemort? The voice in the darkness almost didn't scare Quirrell's soul away, turning grayish-white at a speed visible to the naked eye, let alone answering. The darkness at the door was silenced by Quirrell, who came in or left, and the situation stalemated for a while. Fortunately, Quirrell is not reliable, but the Voldemort on his head is a classic villain from scratch, and this face can scare him. Nice and touches people. Through the thick turban, Voldemort's voice was somewhat distorted. What kind of thing can't even be spoken? The presence in the dark seems to be very unpleasant. Doesn't the hiding waste even dare to speak loudly? Impudent guy. Voldemort roared in Quirrell's head, take off this obstructive headscarf for me, and I'm going to personally meet this guy who doesn't understand etiquette, Lord. Master, you calm down and do not expose yourself. Quirrell's eyes, ears, nose, and mouth were oozing from Voldemort's roar. Idiot, he has already broken my name, do you think it is useful to play the fool at this time? It's just a laughingstock. Voldemort felt more and more that the slave he was looking for was a little weak-minded. I see, 80% is when you show your horse's feet. Quirrell did not dare to refute Voldemort's words, obediently removed the bandana coiled around his head, and turned his head tremblingly. A creeping head gradually emerged, wrinkled like a toad on the back of Quirrell's head to form a flat snake face. With the sound of Quirrell's arm joints rubbing, Quirrell's arm was reversed by evil magic and transformed into a state dominated by Voldemort. He brushed Quirrell's hands over his face, enjoying a moment of freedom. If it weren't for Quirrell's face behind his back, he would have been even happier. Come out, since you appeared directly in front of me, compared to you are not those cowards and stupid talents, what are you looking for me? Voldemort looked into the darkness. Of course, I've always considered myself a genius. The darkness surging at the door converged into a human form in front of Voldemort. It was an English gentleman in a gorgeous tuxedo and a top hat, only with an icy white mask on his face, ruining his demeanor. I'm here for the simple purpose of working with you. Cooperation, let's talk about your purpose first. Voldemort's eyes narrowed, like a viper raising its head before attacking. My purpose is simple. However, the moment the man spoke, Voldemort suddenly raised his hand and raised Quirrell's wand, and the dark green light converged in front of the wand. Avada is desperate. With a sharp gulp, the legendary forbidden magic that can immediately take people's lives shoots towards the incoming people. Obviously talking about cooperation, but judging from the speed of Voldemort's hands, he did not intend to have a good conversation from the beginning. Obviously, for this mysterious person who broke his identity with a single word, Voldemort had a strong murderous intention. However, what Voldemort did not expect was that the fire dragon that could easily kill any wizard, even the fire dragon with the high demon anti-dragon skin, would be severely damaged, just coated the mysterious man with a layer of green light, and disappeared after a while. Is this your Death Eater's unique welcome ceremony? Greet with a destiny spell when you meet. The mysterious man patted his tuxedo, patting away the remaining green light, as if slapping insignificant dust. Voldemort was stunned when he saw this, even if his strength was damaged, but the life curse was still a life curse, how could anyone be able to ignore it? Even if the other party uses magic to block or dodge him, he will not be so surprised. This can only show one thing, this person in front of him is extremely vigilant, has long been prepared, must have used some kind of magic prop to block this life-threatening curse. Moreover, this magic prop is amazingly strong, allowing him to touch the residue of the death spell with his bare hands. Thinking of this, Voldemort regained his composure and said, if you want to cooperate with me, you must also see if you have this ability. Not all small fish and shrimp are qualified to cooperate with me. That's right, but the qualifications are mutual. I now have some doubts about your qualifications. Maybe a Dark Lord who has lost his power is not worthy to cooperate with me. The mysterious man said with a sneer. Voldemort's eyes were gloomy, staring at each other deadly. You came to me just to taunt me? I don't have that kind of idleness. There are many fascinating things in this world. You are just a possibility that I see in my travels. The mysterious man took off his hat and began rummaging through the empty hat for something. Rabbits, pigeons, streamers, balloons, these things poured out of the hat as if endlessly, making a mess of the room. Ah, found it. The mysterious man spoke cheerfully and pulled out a simple note from his hat that seemed to be everywhere. He took out a pen, wrote and drew on the paper, and then the note floated in the air and handed it to Voldemort. It's not interesting to play in a small country, your eyes should be broadened, the mysterious man said. It's an invitation. Well, I know it's rudimentary, but its meaning is extraordinary. I'm inviting people from all over the world who want to change the world, and I think you have the potential. Voldemort took the note and looked at the flying floral writing on it in deep thought. Villains from all over the world unite to become a family invitation. Funny Mr. Tom Riddle, it's great to inform you that you've been given a chance to join our family. You must respect Diabrando. Episode 18, Villain? Voldemort had a greater opinion of the term than the awkward and unexplained creation of the organization. I am a pioneer, a great being who brings about change. Villains are what others call us. The world is ignorant and does not understand our noble sentiments. We call ourselves villains, in fact, to mock the world's mediocre vision. Diabrando waved his finger at Voldemort. Your practice is not enough. By the way, the invitation to you just shows that you are qualified to enter my legal eye, but you are not qualified now. Remember to keep it before you are officially resurrected, otherwise it will be lost or destroyed, but there may not be a chance to make up for it. After handing over the so-called invitation to Voldemort, Diabrando, as if he had finished his work, put on his hat and turned to leave. Suddenly his steps stopped, and the lower body that had already turned around remained motionless, and the upper body folded over to look at Voldemort. This terrifying scene made Voldemort's heart beat wildly. By the way, as an investment to give you a piece of advice. Diabrando slowly stretched his hand to the mask. It's a good idea that you want to steal the Philosopher's Stone, but obviously someone wiser than you thought of this in advance. Your plan this time is impossible to succeed. The Philosopher's Stone is no longer in Gringotts. After saying this, he had completely removed his mask, and a huge red eye that occupied the entire face appeared in front of Voldemort. Voldemort almost missed the wand in his hand and subconsciously took a step back. Good afternoon then. The eyeballs bent into a crescent moon, let out a strange smile, and dissipated into a white smoke with a bang. Along with them, there are rabbits running all over the floor, messy streamers, and colorful balloons floating on the ceiling. The messy scene disappeared in an instant, the door was closed, and the lock was unharmed, as if no one had ever entered, let alone sent Voldemort any invitations. However, the plain and even somewhat worn note was in Voldemort's hand, the handwriting on it was clearly visible, and the elegant body was still there. But there was no trace of magic on it, it was just an ordinary note. Lord. Master? Rocky's voice trembled, and the pain of flipping his hands and feet was tormenting him. Can you let go of me? Voldemort was silent for a moment, letting go of his grip on Quirrell's body. The bones and joints flipped again, and Quirrell turned around with a pale face, almost fainting in pain. The note with the handwriting was in his hand at this time, and the name Diabrando appeared in his eyes. Master, do we want to continue our plan? Quirrell asked shakily. Although he didn't see the scene where the man named Dior took off his mask, it was enough to be able to kill the Dark Lord without dying was enough to terrify him. It was comparable to the heyday of the Dark Lord. No, even stronger than the Dark Lord's terrifying existence. His words are very credible. Voldemort was silent for a long time, so long that Quirrell wondered if the Dark Lord was asleep, and suddenly, he said. Go on, of course you want to continue. Voldemort's voice was calm. Validate his words, whether true or not. Yes, Master. Lewis came out of the toilet and breathed a sigh of relief at the mage hand that did not have any problems beside him. Just now, he disguised himself as the so-called Diabrando, but he did not play in person, but performed a performance through the invisible mage hand and illusion through a wall. Although he had been prepared, he couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat when he saw Voldemort give Diabrando a death curse without hesitation. Fortunately, as a magician, he thought of this possibility and took precautions in advance, otherwise it would not be funny to play others to play himself to death. But the experiment was successful, and Voldemort couldn't see through illusions, although he wasn't in very good shape, so life at Hogwarts would be safer. Lewis thought. And digging a hole for Voldemort early, the whole non-existent special organization distracted him. The Dark Lord is a fitting spectator, and Lewis has a hunch that he will be his best fraud point extractor. As for why the pseudonym Dior is the villain of the first and third parts of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, he is known as the savior of the bad guys. Make up an evil organization with Dior's name, don't be too cool, okay? But now it's not this that matters, it's... You fooled an evil powerful soul and made him doubt the existence of an organization of supposedly world villains united into one family. This fooling will have a huge impact on the target. You earn achievements, mock the Dark Lord's fraudster, and all dark arts endurance increases by 50%. You have obtained fraud points, 700 points, current points 860 points. You got a chance to win a legendary prize draw. Note, the legend draw is the 4th level draw, and each draw requires 10,000 fraud points. Here it comes. Lewis's eyes lit up, and this continuous reward prompt made him feel like he was sent. The 700 fraud points seemed extremely cheap at this time, and in comparison, whether it was the 50% resistance of black magic or the legendary lottery worth 10,000 points, he felt like he was dreaming. Sure enough, it's right to choose to go to the wizarding world, if nothing else, the higher level lottery is worth spending more attention. Lewis couldn't wait, but the draw wasn't right in the leaky cauldron, and Mr. Wilson was still waiting for him. Lewis walked out of the bathroom and found Mr. Wilson, who was waiting at the door of the bar. Why is it so slow? Mr. Wilson bit off the head of a chocolate frog in one bite, felt the strange touch in his mouth, and showed a wonderful expression. Mr. Wilson really likes the wizarding world. Episode 19. It's a little diarrhea. In addition, Dad, you need to eat less candy, and the candy of the wizarding world also contains sugar. Lewis, who had just fooled the Dark Lord, said with a deep hidden merit and fame. Okay, then don't eat. Well, let's go. Mr. Wilson said he would not eat, but still shoved the remaining chocolate into his mouth, and then carried the large bag and pushed the door out. The two came to the street of Charing Cross, and just when they reached the intersection, Mr. Wilson was in a bit of a trance. He looked back, and there was a little confusion in his eyes. "It's amazing," he said, "and like that motorcycle, I can't find that bar at all. Son, can you see it?" Yes, right on the side of the road." Muggle Lewis could only make an expression that I could certainly see, and the Sharingan's powerful reproduction allowed him to pinpoint the blanks on the street, the location of the leaky cauldron. Seeing this, Mr. Wilson suddenly sighed. Compared with wizards, ordinary people really have a big gap, and I have to admit that even the most crappy wizard is much more amazing than a magician. No wonder they look down on ordinary people and call us muggles. Obviously, for this real magic, Mr. Wilson, who has been trying to create miracles with magicians, is really supernatural, and even affects his self-confidence. Lewis understood this, but he didn't know how to comfort his father. For a magician, the advanced nature of civilization makes no sense, but magic is all-round and irresistible to the full range of magic, and any words of comfort pale in comparison. So he could only choose to divert the subject and ask, "Dad, have you prepared a gift for Mom?" Of course, this is an important prop related to our life and death." Mr. Wilson came back to his senses. Go back quickly." Although the two hurried to hurry, they could not get home before lunch, and there was no delicious lunch waiting for them at home, only Mrs. Wilson, who was on the verge of an outburst of anger. "Lambert, I want you to explain, why don't you quit and don't take your son out in the middle of the night?" Mrs. Wilson, so angry that she could not even maintain her graceful temperament, roared angrily. "Didn't we leave you a note?" Mr. Wilson laughed and explained, "Shouldn't it be a farewell? You mean that bizarre note? I took my son to visit another world. Don't read." Mrs. Wilson took out the note. "You wrote human words on it?" Poof. Lewis, who was watching the battle, almost choked himself to death without a sip of water, but he didn't expect his father to have a very dark humor style. God visited another world, and Mrs. Wilson didn't call the police his true love. "I was in a bit of a hurry, so I didn't have time to consider the wording, so I suddenly thought of this sentence." Mr. Wilson scratched his head. "All right, honey, don't be angry about the wrinkles." He put his arm around Mrs. Wilson and began an affection without shame. Lightbulb Lewis rolled his eyes, silently went into the kitchen to make himself a sandwich, and then carried the plate upstairs to the room. Adults let the adults solve their own affairs, and it will be more pleasant for no one to watch them communicate. And he wants to do something more pleasant, which is the lottery. "System, start the legendary draw," Lewis said as he sat at his desk. "Successful consumption, start the legendary draw." As the system's prompt flashed, colorful light bloomed in front of Lewis's eyes. Without those countless points of light, Lewis only felt that shadows flashed in front of him. There are pitch-black dragons with wings covering the sky and hanging bones, human figures with wings on their backs and emitting golden light, and dashing sword fairies with flying swords on their feet. Finally, a green man stood up, wearing pants of the same color and looking at a rather familiar, ugly monster frozen in front of Lewis. Immediately after, the monster's phantom dissipated, turning into 12 points of light and blending into Lewis's body. The legendary lottery is completed, and the power of the Holy Lord, 12 spells, is obtained, 12 charms. Lewis's eyes lit up and he almost didn't jump to the ceiling. The 12 charms, from the anime Changlong Adventures, are powerful charms that run through the entire anime, corresponding to the Chinese zodiac. These charms are the source of the power of the evil dragon Holy Lord, and they are also the product of a spell specially restrained by the Holy Lord, and the Holy Lord who loses these charms will become a stone statue that can only be awakened once every 100 years. A rat transformed by static movement, a cow with infinite strength, a tiger with a balance of yin and yang, a fast rabbit, a dragon with bursting flames, a stealthy snake, a healing horse, an out-of-body sheep, a shape-shifting monkey, a floating chicken, an undead dog, a pig with electric eyes. Lewis is so precious about the power of these spells, and these powerful forces are enough to make him the most powerful human in this world. It is worthy of the legendary lottery, this reward, strong, outrageous. Lewis felt the power surging in his body and was very satisfied. What happened to Muggles? He is a Muggle who breathes fire, transforms, turns stone statues into living statues, turns any object into animals, and who can say he's a Muggle? After a simple attempt at the power of the spell, Lewis's excitement finally calmed down, and then he began to try to find the shortcomings of the power system of the 12 charms. There seems to be some limitations to this ability, and the limitations are not so complete, said Lewis to himself. Episode 20. In the anime, the completely unconsumed quality of the 12 charms is preserved in Lewis. Those forces seem to be solidified, and Galileo's coffin plate was nailed to the concrete floor when the upper limit of power was limited. At the same time, according to the performance in the anime, this set of charms seems to be also placed with some kind of hidden restrictions. Some spells don't seem to be able to be used at the same time. In the anime, the setting of the Holy Lord's ability to rise and fall has always been criticized by the audience, especially at the end of the first season. He was actually pressed and beaten by the protagonist with 12 spells. Some people say that it is because of underestimating the enemy, but when he gained the power of the 12 charms, Lewis understood the reason. Although the 12 charms are the power of the Holy Lord, they are actually the product of the Holy Lord's research on magic, and he himself is a fire demon, not an all-powerful demon. The spells formed by these magical products have a very simple conflict principle. That is the interdependence of attributes. The Chinese zodiac signs have their own attributes. Pigs and rats are water genus, ox dragons, sheep and dogs, all are native genus, tigers and rabbits are wood, snakes and horses are fire, and monkey chickens are gold. Therefore, the attributes of mutual restraint cannot be used at the same time, such as the use of pigs' electric optical eyes, and there is no way to use invisible snakes and healed horses, cows, dragons, sheep, and dogs at the same time, which are also compatible with water, and cannot be used together. Of course, this is for Lewis, who has completed the 12 charms and incorporated into his body, and if it is a physical charm, there is no taboo in holding it in his hand. Of course, the power of the passively effective spell is not affected, here it simply refers to the time when the power of the charm is actively released. Even with electric eyes, Lewis will be immortal under the action of dog charms. He will only be unable to release the power of the dog charm to protect others from death when releasing the power of the pig charm. This makes my Hogwarts life more interesting. If a real wizard is not as good as a fake wizard, then who can say that a fake wizard is fake? Lewis smiled, jumped up and did 3 sets of single-finger push-ups. He now feels full of power, and the infinite power of the bull charm is also a passive blessing, and his current physical strength is ridiculously strong. So true mages are all learning one-handed lighting and then full swordsmanship, which is similar to me, who occupies the name of a wizard, but is actually a muggle with a full physical strength. Lewis experimented with his abilities in the room, trying it again and again, before stopping to sit at the desk. He casually picked out a Hogwarts textbook and flipped through it, intending to memorize it. There is still a month before the start of school, and this time he needs to study hard, but he can't be afraid of ignorance. Half a month later, Lewis was sitting at his desk, looking at the potions book in front of him and lost in thought. The owl, named Fafnir, obediently crouched in the cage, looking at Lewis, who was reading a book with big smart eyes. The book, titled 1,000 Magical Herbs and Mushrooms, is a dual-subject textbook for potions and herbology, which Lewis drew for 3 days and memorized with the power of the Sharingan. In addition to the common sense of some herbs, there is also a very important sentence in it. A muggle can't brew potions, and even if he uses the same method correctly, he can only make a paste with unknown effect. This is a quote written by the author of this book, which not only smothered Lewis, a muggle, but also caused him great problems by the way. He couldn't make a qualified potion. What would he do if he took a potions class? This is not something that a powerful force can solve. Even if he shakes the material yellow, he can't turn it into magic. Fortunately, I found it early, otherwise I will find that I can't survive the potion before it is really finished. Lewis sighed and threw the book aside, and in the corner of the room, stacked with textbooks he had read, every word he remembered clearly, but he really hadn't learned any magic. He had once again established his muggle identity. It's really unpleasant. Lewis leaned back in his chair and looked out the window. Suddenly, a line of handwriting appeared in front of his eyes, which was a prompt from the system. You have infiltrated the Wizarding Academy as a muggle, fooling the wizard's principle of secrecy and several wizards associated with your admission. You fooled Rubeus Hagrid, the half-blood giant, the legendary wizard Albus Dumbledore, the experienced and sensitive adult wizard Minerva McGonagall, the school rules of Hogwarts. Your foolishness does not matter to the above people, etc. You earned fraud points, 4,700 points. Current fraud points, 5,560. The reward was distributed, but the results were not ideal. While it is true that a muggle attending Hogwarts is mocking, it is just an inconsequential matter for those wizards. Lewis touched his nose, so it seems that it must be a particularly influential scam to get a reward like Voldemort. However, there is one thing that Lewis is concerned about, and that is what to do to open the next level of the draw. I opened a boutique lottery when I met and tricked the first underage wizard I met, but I didn't open the next level when I deceived an adult and powerful wizard like Voldemort. Lewis pondered the relationship, but had no clue. The items of the legendary draw are too strong, and Lewis is only an unknown level away from the legendary draw. How can he not be in a hurry? Forget it, this matter is slowly pondered, let's draw first. Lewis looked at his fraud points. 5,560 points. Enough for the boutique lottery for 10 consecutive draws. Whether it is the wheel eye or the space ring, it is not a small help to me, and the boutique lottery is not to be underestimated. System, arrange a 10 draw for me. Episode 21. If you can't draw out alone, 10 companies are king. Boutique lottery starts 10 consecutive draws. The system prompt was fleeting, and a dazzling golden light flooded Lewis's field of vision. 10 golden rays of light fell in front of Lewis, and as the draw ended, the light dissipated, while information about the items he had drawn flooded into his mind. Mental Power Instant Strengthening Potion *3. Instantly improve the user's mental strength and spiritual precision. The strength is 5-10 times, based on personal physique, and the mental power will be permanently strengthened after use. Powerful Stain Remover, removes 99% of dirt in 3 minutes. Endless Little Red Bottle, contains 3 parts of the medicine to quickly treat any injury, does not leave scars, has a cosmetic effect, refreshes the medicine every day, and cannot be stored by means other than the small red bottle. Hulk's Magic Pants, teen movie rating, magical pants that are absolutely indestructible and have no use other than that. Gene Enhancement Agent, for reptiles, *3, optimize the gene sequence of reptiles. Disposable Magic Scroll, Meteor Fire Shower, summons 10 5x5x5 size meteor showers to bombard the target area, with a damage range of 300 meters in diameter and a cast distance of 15 meters. A bunch of debris fell in front of Lewis. Agents with a gun syringe, to stain removers with spray heads, round-bottomed flasks with red liquid, scrolls with a fiery red glow. There was also a large green pants slit dangling in the air. The corners of Lewis's eyes twitched, and teleportation generally broke out of the pants' shrouded range. In order not to be covered by this magical pants, he subconsciously used the extreme power of the rabbit charm. The pants fell to the ground, and the huge area was 4 square meters. Although this pants looks clean, Lewis always feels that there is some unknown hair stuck to this thing. Boom! A ball of dragon flame rolled up the big pants under Lewis's control, and the bursting flames released a terrifying high temperature under his restraints, enveloping the big pants inside. Really, as the system explained, this pants really can't be destroyed, even the dragon charm of Long Yen can't help it. But how about that? It's just a pants, and being indestructible means it can't be transformed, and you can't change it into a trench coat. Bah! Who wants to wear a trench coat with pants changed? In disgust, Lewis threw the pants into the space where the ring leads, found a corner that would not touch other things, and tucked it in, letting it stay in it and never see the light of day. After dealing with the Hulk's magic pants, Lewis's eyes were set on something else. Among them, the most valuable should be the endless little red bottle, a good thing that can heal injuries. It's a pity that he has a dog charm to save his life, and Lewis, who heals from a horse charm, can't use it. But maybe when will it be used? Lewis didn't think much of putting it in the storage space, where he could reach it instantly. In the same way, there are also disposable magic scrolls and spiritual power instant enhancement potions, which are items for emergency use, and they are taken out in case at critical moments. As for the genetic enhancement potion and stain remover, these are completely unneeded things and sundries, which Lewis casually threw into the storage space and put together the sundries. This lottery reminded Lewis that not every prize is suitable for Lewis or something that can be used, and it is possible to pop up with a debris such as a strong stain remover or simply a waste with special effects like the Hulk's pants. But the higher the level, the draw will definitely get better, and it is more important to unlock the higher level draw as soon as possible. Lewis sat back down at the table and picked up a pack of rats and threw it to Fafnir. Watching Fafnir expertly pull the rat out of the bag and tear it, Lewis thought about his future plans. Fraud points. Or try to save, and then Hogwarts will find a way to unlock other levels of draws, and that kind of achievement. The above methods all focused on Dumbledore, the legendary wizard of Hogwarts. It is quite possible that a fraud that has a great impact on Dumbledore will earn achievements or even unlock more advanced draws. After all, he is stronger than Voldemort, and he is still in full condition, and he has a powerful Elder Wand. The fraudster who mocked the Dark Lord achievement from Voldemort gave Louis 50% dark arts resistance, so what kind of achievement can you get by fooling Dumbledore? With Dumbledore's erudition, I'm afraid that I can't get full magic resistance, and I think it's beautiful when I think about it. Lewis, there is your letter. Just as Lewis was thinking about it, Mrs. Wilson's voice came from downstairs. Oh, is there a letter? It's almost time to calculate it. Lewis closed Fafnir's cage, turned and headed downstairs. Fafnir let out a grumbling cry, his crooked beak tugging at the door of the cage. Quiet, in a few days you will be able to fly casually. Lewis reassured before going out. Recently, the neighbor opposite has been somewhat allergic to owls, and the owls that delivered Harry's letters have caused trouble not only for the Dursleys, but also for other families. To be on the safe side, Fafnir is better off not flying around and causing trouble. Episode 22, Mom, what about my letter? Lewis came downstairs to the kitchen and asked. In the living room, there are 2 letters. Mrs. Wilson poked her head out in the kitchen and rubbed Lewis's shaggy hair meaningfully. Somewhat inexplicable, Lewis touched his head, turned and walked to the living room. In the drawing room, Mr. Wilson was entertaining visitors with Fafnir's rations, but to Lewis's surprise, there were 2 owls. Mr. Wilson saw Lewis, smiled and beckoned. "Hi, Lewis, come over soon, your school and your classmates have written to you." Classmates? School words Lewis also understands. What is going on with this so-called classmate? Lewis walked over and saw 2 letters on the table. One of them was from Hogwarts. It was an unusual letter of admission. Its contents had changed because of Lewis's special circumstances, and because it was probably the first time since Hogwarts had made such a flaw. The entire letter was handwritten by Headmaster Albus Dumbledore. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Headmaster, Albus Dumbledore, President of the International Federation of Wizards, recipient of the Order of Sir Merlin First Class, Grand Magician, Chief Wizard of the Wizengamot. Dear Mr. Wilson, we are very sorry that we missed your entrance to Hogwarts because of our omission, and although it is a little late, we are happy to inform you that you are welcome to Hogwarts. I heard that you have received help from Hagrid through your wisdom and observation, and there will be no more lists of items required for admission, including a train ticket to Hogwarts. In addition, in order to express our apologies, please visit the principal's office the day after admission to discuss your compensation. Principal, Male. Albus Dumbledore respectfully. There is no doubt that this is a personal letter from the principal, and it is clear that they take this mistake seriously. Lewis unfolded the envelope and poured out a ticket from it. King's Cross Station, Platform 9 3/4. Seeing this familiar place name, a smile appeared on Lewis's face. Although it is only a ticket, it symbolizes the ticket to the wizarding world. An owl confirmed that Lewis had received the letter of admission and left with a mouse in his mouth, leaving another young-looking owl. Don't look at that letter, look at this one. Mr. Wilson handed over another letter with a smile. First of all, the envelope is a little damaged, but it was definitely not opened by us. The envelope of the letter had scratched marks and a leaf inside, apparently caused by the young messenger's carelessness. The young messenger was now restless on the back of the chair, and the rat that he handed to his mouth did not dare to touch. It is also because of this broken trace that the content of the letter is exposed a little, and there is nothing else but the signature at the end of the letter. Hermione Granger. It seems that the Wilsons had such a performance after seeing this feminine name. Oh, so it's her. Lewis casually opened the envelope and read the contents. The letter didn't say anything important, just that I was a little curious about new friends in addition to studying hard, so I tried to write a letter to greet me. Only the beginning of the letter is a greeting, and the back is full of Hermione Granger's show off what books she has read and what she has learned after reading them. Yes, maybe Hermione Granger herself seemed like she was just sharing, but among her peers it was like a straightforward show off. If other young wizards, let's not talk muggles, didn't learn anything after reading the book, and then saw this letter full of ostentation, it would probably be inseparable from Hermione Granger on the spot. Fortunately, Lewis knew what kind of person the girl who wrote the letter was, so he did not feel any discomfort because of the letter. The letter also said that she had later traveled to Diagon Alley herself to buy books about the wizarding world. She also recommended a history of Hogwarts to Lewis. She's really good, I just memorized the textbook, but she has the effort to read other books. Lewis, who has weakened the drawbacks of rewriting, can only lament Hermione Granger's talent. As for the book she recommended, Lewis directly ignored. School history? Whoever has the effort to pay attention to that kind of thing, there is a trace of the past and the future. He had read the entire set of Harry Potter Prophet. It's okay, I don't blame you, it's hard to deliver the letter. Lewis scratched the restless owl and shoved the mouse dry into its paws. Wait a minute, I have a reply. He wrote a reply letter casually, politely praising the other party's learning progress and studious spirit, and thanking the other party for recommending books. After writing the letter, Lewis wrapped it up and handed it to the owl. Give it to your owner. The owl finished eating the dried mouse in 3 or 2 clicks, took the letter in its mouth, fluttered its wings, and flew out of the window. Lewis, aren't you going to introduce this Miss Granger? Mr. Wilson said with a gossipy look. Almost at the same time, Mrs. Wilson in the kitchen poked her head out of the kitchen and listened. It was just a classmate I met by chance, and we exchanged contact information because we were both born into ordinary families. Lewis said seriously. No need to be shy, Louise and your mom and I don't mind you falling in love at this age. Mr. Wilson laughed and patted Lewis on the shoulder. Lewis shrugged and didn't speak again. No one believes the truth, this is really a helpless thing. I already knew that it was better to lie, my parents were happy, and I could earn a fraud point. Episode 23, Platform 9 and March 4th, please board before 11 a.m., not waiting. Wearing a small tuxedo and a top hat, Lewis looked down at the ticket in his hand like a small old British gentleman. Lewis's dress is slightly pompous, but it is nothing for his age. People are always more tolerant of children, not to mention that he is normal compared to those who occasionally appear in the crowd, wear strange robes, and behave strangely. There are always some weirdos in the station at this time of year. Lewis was pushing his luggage and heard a flight attendant complain as he passed by. This is normal, and the beginning of the school season must be a time for wizards to be infested on a large scale. While pureblood wizards had their own ways of getting to Hogwarts, it was traditional to get to Hogwarts by train, and pureblood wizards who disdained Muggles had to lay down and pass by Muggles. And these high-ranking pureblood wizards do not touch Muggles. Naturally, they do not know the fashion trends of Muggles and the rules of public places, and their clothing behavior can easily attract Muggle criticism. But they don't care about that. Number 9. Number 9. 1, 2, 3. Lewis was pushing the luggage cart on the platform and counting the pillars, when suddenly he stopped. It's really troublesome. Lewis turned around in distress and released the mage's hand to navigate himself. There was also a Muggle expulsion spell around the pillars leading to platform 9 3/4, but it wasn't very effective and would make it easy for Muggles to ignore it. Otherwise, sooner or later, someone will notice the student wizards who calmly push the luggage cart through the wall. Through the distance correction of the mage's hand, Lewis finally walked through the overlooked area to the pillar. It seems that you really can't be careless. Lewis straightened his top hat and looked at the opposite wall and hesitated. Rushing towards the wall is too challenging the common sense of ordinary people. Let's slow down. Lewis pushed the luggage cart slowly close to the wall, and when he saw that the front of the cart disappeared into the wall as if it was submerged in the water, he was relieved to boldly speed up. Even so, at the moment when the wall was on the verge of the face, Lewis involuntarily closed his eyes. This is human instinct, not shameful. Crossing a dark path, Lewis opened his eyes when a loud whistle sounded in his ears. You are greeted by an old-fashioned train station, and the steam from the old steam trains fogs the entire station. Leave the luggage to me. A man in a red conductor's uniform took the cart from Lewis, looked at the clothes on Lewis, shrugged and pointed to the front. Please go to the front, someone over there checks the ticket. Thank you. Lewis took off his top hat to express his gratitude to the conductor, pulled a streamer from his arms, and turned it into a cane with both hands. Under the surprised eyes of the conductor, Lewis handed over his ticket with a cane and boarded the train. Among the little wizards in robes, Lewis stands out. After all, with his pompous top hat, he has a height of 1.7 meters, which looks particularly conspicuous. Lewis smiled slightly, felt the gaze nearby, and in front of everyone's eyes, took out his tall imitation old wand and tapped his top hat. Whoosh! The tuxedo suddenly spread out and turned into a robe, and the pompous Lewis instantly turned into an ordinary little wizard dress. There was an uproar in the carriage, and all the little wizards who saw the scene just now exclaimed, and the little wizards who did not see Lewis transform curiously poked their heads out to see the excitement. For a while, the carriage seemed to be about to explode. You have bewitched a group of underage wizards with the most ordinary dress-up magic, an inconsequential fool. You get fraud points, 2,000 points. Current points, 2,560. Sure enough, the wizard's fraud points are easy to earn. Lewis took off his top hat with a smile and saluted all around, like a magician leaving the scene gracefully after the show. Then he saw Hermione Granger waving in front of a carriage. Lewis, here. Hermione seemed happy to meet an acquaintance here, even if that acquaintance had only met her once, and spent less than 5 minutes together. Miss Granger, good afternoon. Lewis bypassed the curious little wizard who wanted to pull his robes and walked over to Hermione and smiled in greeting. Just call me Hermione, we've all gone through the letters, I think we should be considered friends. Hermione said enthusiastically, would you like to sit in a carriage with me? It's my pleasure. Lewis nodded. Hermione wasn't the only one in the carriage, but also a round-faced boy and his toad friend who looked like he was reluctant. This is? Lewis asked. His name is Neville, Neville Longbottom. Hermione introduced. This is Lewis Wilson, a magician. Hello. Mr. Wilson. Neville hesitantly stood up and greeted Lewis. What is a magician? A very powerful wizard? The English magician is a variation of the word magic and magic are the same word. There is no magic in the wizarding world, and the one who looks upwards and doesn't have much contact with Muggles obviously doesn't know what magic is. Hello Neville, just call me Lewis. Lewis said, as for the magician. It's just a profession that brings laughter to everyone. Neville became even more curious when he heard this vague explanation, and he was just about to ask, but Hermione preempted him. Lewis, is that one just now magic or magic? Hermione looked excited, her brown eyes as if they were shining with starlight. Episode 24, Hermione deliberately used the word witchcraft to distinguish magic from magic. Neville also looked at Lewis curiously. As a pureblood wizard, Neville has received a basic magical education since he was a child, and understands how complex the principles of some seemingly simple changes are. It would be amazing if what Lewis had just performed was really magic. This instantaneous change of costume involved a difficult transfiguration charm and required a high level of proficiency. Oh, no, the transfiguration spell is very difficult, I haven't mastered it yet. Lewis held up a finger. I can tell you, but don't tell anyone, it's a magician's secret. No problem, we'll keep it a secret for you. Hermione naturally took Neville and made a reassurance. This strong personality is probably the reason why it is difficult for Miss Granger to make friends in school later. Except for Neville, the round-faced boy who just needed such a strong friend. In that case, I'll tell you. Lewis smiled and patted the hem of his robe, making a bang, bang sound. This is a very common dress-changing mechanism. I have slightly modified the robe. Lewis lifted the hem to show the two for a while. This is an inverted tuxedo inside, double coat. As long as it is buttoned like this, it is a tuxedo, and it is a robe when put down. Lewis demonstrated it, and then removed the inner lining of the robe in front of the two. Why did you tear it down? What a shame. Hermione asked. I won't need it in the future anyway, will I? And they make this robe uncomfortable to wear. Lewis took off his top hat and tucked the lining into it. These linings were removed from the tuxedo gown of excellent fabric, stuffed into this small hat, and piled to the brim. Why can't you use it? Isn't this a magic prop that can be reused? Hermione said regretfully, looking at the broken thread on the inner lining. A qualified magician will not perform a simple magic trick over and over again unless he is sure that his magic is perfect. Lewis tapped the brim of his hat with his wand, and instantly a hollow seemed to appear under the hat, and the pile of lining fragments actually leaked full. Lewis showed the hood to the two, and the empty hat didn't look like it had so much fabric stuffed in. Is this also magic? What is the principle that Hermione has a bit of a mouth when she speaks? I can't tell you that I'm not going to give up on this magic yet. Lewis set the top hat aside and let Hermione and Neville examine it, the inconspicuous ring on his hand sparkling. Because the entire ring is set with unknown crushed stones, this ring does not look obtrusive, and Lewis's intentional or unintentional decoration of more conspicuous items on his body makes it even more difficult to detect. The magic trick that the fabric disappeared just now was done with this ring that leads to space, without any difficulty, but its principle cannot be told to others. You used vanishing magic to hide the existence of portable private space teleportation points and fool two curious underage wizards. Continuous fooling in a short period of time causes the fooled object to have mental inertia, and your gain is halved. An inconsequential fraud. You get fraud points, 100 points. Current fraud points, 2,660. Continuous magic shows in a short period of time will cause aesthetic fatigue in the audience. After all, the magical magic shows a principle that will make the audience curious, and too many times will overwhelm the audience. Lewis used his own experience as a magician to explain the system's feedback, and decided that future magic shows should try to give these little wizards as much buffer time as possible. This is not wrong. In a way, magicians and fraudsters do the same thing, but for different purposes. Phew. 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 With the sound of the whistle, the train started slowly, feeling the movement of the steam train that was at least 50 years behind. Lewis looked out the window with calm eyes. In a few hours, he will reach Hogwarts, the magical castle, where he still has to face a graduate school exam. Face Dumbledore, the legendary wizard. If it was Lewis who only had a copy of the Wheel Eye and the Mage's Hand on his side, he would inevitably be a little panicked at this time, but at this time he had the power of the 12 spells obtained from the legendary lottery, and Lewis was now doubting whether Dumbledore could beat him. But I'm not here to play conquest. Wizards are all gold mines, and violence can't earn fraud points. Lewis pulled out a gold galleon and made it rotate between his fingers, and his dexterous fingers made it not fall, no matter how many pieces it turned. Neville on the other side was stunned, and his eyes followed the Garen and almost didn't fall out of his sockets. Just when he was distracted, the toad in his hand couldn't sit still, slapped it on the ground with a snap, and then jumped out of the box before Neville could react. Ah! Radford! Neville exclaimed, and hurriedly ran out to grab his toad, but in a panic, he gave the toad named Leifu another kick. Leaf panicked even more and staggered out of here at a faster speed. Lewis looked thoughtfully at the fleeing toad. Unexpectedly, this is part of the plot. Neville's toad is lost, and the strong but enthusiastic Hermione begins to help him find his pet, and thus meets Harry Ron. Since then, the source of incomprehension has become the responsibility of wisdom and action in the trio. Well, it's the role of being a father and a mother in the trio. Lewis suddenly had a wonderful feeling, a sense of swelling that stood before fate and had the flow of fate. Episode 25. Lewis, Neville's toad is missing, let's help him find it. Outside the private room, Hermione came in and said, it disappeared in the blink of an eye. I don't know which direction it went, maybe it got into someone else's private room. Do you want to join in? Neville stood next to Hermione, looking grateful, while also looking at Lewis with hopeful eyes. Lewis thought with interest. He was not thinking about whether to help or not to help, he was thinking about whether he should intervene or not. Whether or not he meddled in this matter had little effect on Lewis, but it was very different in terms of entertainment. Without Hermione Granger, a wise man, Harry Potter's adventures don't know what it would become. It's a lot more interesting than watching the same Harry Potter again. It's a long story, but in fact these thoughts just turned around in Lewis's mind and came to fruition. No need to be so troublesome. Lewis smiled and said, leave it to me, it's easy to find Neville's toad with magic. Magic? What kind of magic? Hermione recalled the spell she saw while watching Standard Spells Elementary. It didn't feel like it could help. This spell is called the Flying Charm. Just like this, Lewis waved his wand, Leaf flew in. Waving his wand and chanting incantations were just a pretense, and the shadow of a chicken charm lit up under Lewis's eyes, and a floating power that tended to be like an arm swept through the walls of the carriage and swept through every corner of the train under the guidance of spiritual power. Then he found Rifford in a dark, damp corner of the train lavatory and retrieved him. Neville, who was sitting a little uneasy in his seat under Hermione's comfort, soon saw his limbs scratching, as if Lifer, who had been grabbed by an invisible hand, flew back and floated into his arms. Leaf! Neville exclaimed in surprise and hugged the toad named Leaf. Thank you so much, Lewis. Neville looked at Lewis gratefully, then at Hermione. Thank you too, Hermione, I didn't do anything. Hermione waved her hand and looked at Lewis. What kind of magic is that? Why, I didn't see it in textbooks. Lewis put away his wand and said, because the standard spells are incomplete, the flying spell is the content of the 3rd grade study. I took a look at it when I bought the book, and then I memorized it. This was true. He did see the other volumes of the standard spells, and he also read the spells on them and memorized the wand-wielding techniques and spells through the quick memory that came with the ability to repeat. Of course, a muggle is a muggle. Although he remembers, he still can't use it, and he can only rely on his own ability to make up for a special effect. Fortunately, in the past, he only planned to rely on illusion to make up false special effects, but now he can make up real special effects, and absolutely no one can expose them. Who left the wizard himself without an effective means of detection? But this is the 3rd time in a short period of time that he has used fraud in front of Neville and Hermione, and the reward will not be weakened again, right? Lewis smiled in response to Neville's thanks and Hermione's question about magic while paying attention to the system prompts in front of him. Then a special note caught his attention. The system prompt is divided into 2 segments. The first paragraph is the reward for this fraud, because the reward is reduced to 1/3 of the fraud committed against the same target in a short period of time, and 60 fraud points have been obtained this time, now a total of 2,720 points. The important thing is the next tip marked with a special color. Fate perturbation detected and host behavior will cause a change in the intended fate flow. Current perturbation intensity, extremely weak, ripples of fate that can be corrected at any time. Get reward, 1 destiny point. Fate points, rewards obtained by fooling fate, fighting against fate, and fixing inevitable results. Destiny points can be exchanged for miracle things or used for destiny draw. The destiny draw has been opened, and each draw costs 10 destiny points. Miracle redemption has been opened, currently unlocked product, destiny grafting, fate grafting, grafting the fate of the next period of time onto anything and letting it bear the fate of the next period of time. Fate grafting is a one-time item. There is no limit to the number of exchanges, and the exchange costs 100 fate points, destiny points. Destiny draw. Miracle things. Lewis felt as if the system was born to do something, and the feeling of dominating the flow of fate was really not an illusion. That is still called the fraudster system. It is better to call it directly the troublemaking system. Preventing Hermione from meeting Harry Potter and Ron Weasley on the train is a trivial matter for the established fate, and at Hogwarts, they can meet again at any time and become friends, so the intensity of the disturbance will be extremely weak. Lewis glanced sideways at Hermione, who was reading a book, and the midday sun hit her serious little face, as if bathed in the brilliance of knowledge. What a waste of such a good seedling to go to Gryffindor. Hermione, do you think about which house to go to? Lewis asked with a smile. Academy? Hermione looked up, a little hesitation in her eyes. Is this also optional? I think it should be that Hogwarts should be very tolerant of underage wizards, unless it is really inappropriate, otherwise it should respect the young wizard's own wishes. Lewis said. Episode 26, but I don't know what the difference is between those colleges, I don't know how to choose. Hermione said. All I know is that there are 4 houses at Hogwarts, Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, and Slytherin, but I don't know much about the specifics. Neville, do you know anything about the academy in the school? The cautious Lewis did not reveal his familiarity with Hogwarts, and he chose to ask Neville Longbottom from the pureblood family. Me? I do know a little. Neville was stunned for a moment, and the introverted said in a bit of a panic. Don't be nervous, it's just chatting, we'll have a few more hours to spend together. Lewis said as he looked out the window of the car and looked at the sun still hanging in the sky. It's not good if you're too nervous. That's right, Neville, you need to exercise your guts, don't be afraid, we won't eat you again. Hermione encouraged Neville as well. Okay. Neville took a deep breath and said slowly, I don't actually know much, and I don't know much about what will happen at Hogwarts. I only know that Gryffindor represents courage, Ravenclaw represents wisdom, Slytherin represents shrewdness, and Hufflepuff represents integrity among the 4 houses. The houses in the school are pretty good, except for Slytherin. Every Death Eater is said to be from Slytherin, and they are arrogant and cunning, and they hate wizards from Muggle families. It could be seen that Neville was very bad at Slytherin's senses, and kept saying bad things about this house. Death Eaters? The minions of the legendary mysterious man, my god, how could they be like this? Hermione asked in surprise. Because Slytherins are basically pure-blood wizards, they agree with the mysterious man's words. Neville was a little uneasy. Let's not discuss that person. Well, you're right, I heard that the mysterious man will be noticed by him as long as he pronounces his name. Hermione had obviously heard a lot about the mysterious man. Let's keep talking. Neville, where do you want to go? Gryffindor. Neville said without hesitation, my parents are Gryffindors, and I think I should go there too, but I'm worried I won't be able to get in. Don't worry, I think you have the potential to enter Gryffindor, that's the magician's intuition. Lewis patted Neville on the shoulder. Thank you for your encouragement. Neville said gratefully. And Hermione, what about you? Lewis asked, which college would you like to go to? Hermione Granger was undoubtedly a reckless girl in her bones, otherwise she would not have been sorted into Gryffindor, but it was undeniable that her talent was more outstanding than her courage. I think it's okay, as long as you don't go to Slytherin. Hermione said hesitantly. Slytherin sounds scary, and they seem to discriminate against wizards from families like us. That's true, but I feel like you're a good fit for Ravenclaw, Hermione. Lewis winked. Your ability to learn shows that your intelligence is absolutely outstanding, but I'm no better than you, I haven't learned those senior spells. Hermione muttered, so where are you going to go? Me? Magicians always like a bit of a challenge, and I'd love to go to Slytherin to meet the descendants of the Death Eaters if I could. Lewis patted his top hat. It's challenging, isn't it? It's crazy. Neville couldn't help but say, they're going to kick you out, maybe they'll insult you, bully you. I hope they have the ability. Lewis shook his head and smiled. Besides, I'm just saying that the specific situation depends on the way the house is sorted, but Hermione, I think you are really a suitable Ravenclaw, your wisdom is impressive. If I had the chance, I would choose Ravenclaw. Lewis's compliment made Hermione happy. Hermione and Lewis would describe life in the Muggle world to Neville, while Neville would tell them about the wizarding lifestyle, both different ways of life that seemed irrational but magical to both sides. In the end, the topic fell on the unknown entrance examination again, and Lewis, who knew the answer, was a little speechless. He didn't understand why Muggle wizards like Hermione and pure-blood wizards like Neville thought that such a thing as another entrance examination was like a great enemy. When it came to the entrance exam, Hermione kept repeating with a stiff face that she was okay because she had learned all the magic on the standard spell element. In such a pleasant chat atmosphere, soon it was dark. As night swallowed up the setting sun, the train gradually slowed down into an older station. The whistle sounded again, announcing the end of the journey, and the young wizards began to step down the train one after another. The senior students left the station in groups, leaving the freshmen standing in place at a loss. New students at Hogwarts, set here. At this time, Hagrid, carrying an oil lamp, appeared. He shouted to attract everyone's attention, and the freshman standing closer to him couldn't help but cover his ears. It was a wise decision to have a half-blood giant lead the new students. He was conspicuous enough and deterred enough. Who would have thought that this good guy who looks like a tiger and a leopard is actually a kind and cute? Episode 27. There are not many people, but it is still a bit crowded together. Hermione was stunned by the crowd in the ranks. And it's raining. There were raindrops falling in the sky, and although it was still September, the rain still made her feel a little chilly. I have an umbrella here. Lewis turned back to Hermione and said. He tapped on his top hat and pulled an umbrella out of it. Let's go together. You are a personal gentleman. Hermione covered her mouth and smiled, lifting the hem of her robe as if to raise her skirt. Lewis slowly advanced along the large army, and compared to the little wizards who braved the rain, Lewis and Hermione were in a good situation. However, this does not mean safety. Some young wizards patronize the rain without paying attention to their feet, accidentally slipping and falling all over the mud. This forced Hermione to carefully tug on the hem of Lewis's clothes so as not to accidentally fall. As for Neville, he no longer knew where he was being squeezed and hoped that his leaf would not be squeezed into the lake. The new students boarded the boats, and with the blessing of magic, these boats automatically sailed towards the castle on the opposite bank. At night, the huge castle looks mysterious and majestic under the huge moon, and the light flowing from the windows adds a touch of warmth to this majestic castle. Entering Hogwarts by ship is to repeat the path of the founders of Hogwarts in establishing Hogwarts, so as to pass on the spirit. Hermione sat beside Lewis and looked nervously at the lake and said. Well, you said this in the book you recommended, right? Lewis said casually. You see? Hermione was a little surprised. I thought you were just perfunctory to me and wouldn't look at it. Why do you think I'll be perfunctory? Lewis asked rhetorically. I'm a person who can't help but show off what I've learned, I know that, but it's always hard to correct. Very few people were willing to make friends with me in the Muggle world before. Even if they did, they would soon leave me because of my personality. Hermione was depressed. You and Neville are the fastest friends I've ever met. Also best friend. Lewis looked at the girl's lowered eyebrows and thought for a while. Comforting, genius always has something unusual, and now you can rest assured that our friendship will be as strong as this boat, so don't worry about the Black Lake, you can't fall. Hermione was a little stunned. How can you tell that I'm a little afraid of the lake? After all, your expression is there, worse than when you said on the train that you were worried about the entrance examination. As a magician, I always have to watch the audience's reaction, so I'm sensitive to changes in expression. I feel that a normal magician is not as powerful as you. Hermione whispered. The boats docked one by one, and under Hagrid's watch, the freshmen jumped ashore one by one, and Lewis jumped first, turned around and helped Hermione down. At the castle gates, Hagrid pointed to the stairs leading to the auditorium and said, "Go up the stairs, and your professor is waiting for you above." After saying this, Hagrid left, and although the freshmen had no guide, they did not run around under the attraction of the mysterious style in the castle, and they all obediently followed the army. But some people always like to do something unusual. Just as they were about to reach the gate of the Great Hall, the team suddenly stopped, and a voice said, "It seems that those people on the train are right. Harry Potter has also come to Hogwarts." This voice caused an uproar, and everyone looked around, hoping to see the legendary savior. Hermione stood on tiptoe curiously and looked ahead. What happened? Hermione also had concern on her face about the non-existent entrance assessment. Why did everyone stop? With his height advantage and the special eyesight of the Sharingan, Lewis could easily see what was happening at the front of the team, and he could still hear the voices coming from that 100 years. It seems like a strange social interaction. Lewis explained to Hermione. The kind that is a failure. Social? Peculiar? Fail? Hermione couldn't imagine how those 3 words fit into one sentence. I'll take you to the front row to watch. Lewis winked and took Hermione's small hand. Hermione was startled, and before she could pull her hand, she saw Lewis squeezing forward forcefully. Drive, borrowed, and you, put your feet away. Lewis showed a strong physique that did not fit in with his thin body. The crowd of people crowded together was easily separated by him, and the little wizards blocking the front felt as if they were being pushed away by a cow. The shadow of the cow charm under Lewis's eyes flashed, and his expression was light. Soon, Lewis was at the front of the line with Hermione and the other young wizards complaining and caught up with the live broadcast. A more mature blonde boy was saying something to the red-haired boy. The blonde boy was undoubtedly Draco Malfoy, and standing opposite him was clearly the protagonist Harry Potter and his little friend Ron Weasley. With red hair, old robes, and that face that looks like it can never be washed, I don't even have to ask who you are, you must be a Weasley. Draco Malfoy glanced at Ron Weasley with disdain and then at Harry. People like you shouldn't make friends with people who don't make good friends. He held out his hand full of confidence. Harry looked down at the graceful Draco Malfoy's outstretched hand and shook his head. I'm sorry, I'll tell what's good or bad. Episode 28, Wonderful Speech. Such a faceless move seemed to be a slap on the face of Draco, who was proud of his bloodline surname, and the smile at the corner of his mouth suddenly disappeared. The blonde and Sundara Jingtai failed in the middle too aristocratic-style social routine, and the scene was like the mistress dissed the original match in front of the original match, and was slapped in the face by the male protagonist. Well, it's not that exaggerated, it's actually Harry Potter's first meeting with Draco Malfoy. Harry, with black hair and snapper green eyes, stood beside Ron and confronted Draco Malfoy, who had combed his blonde hair. The values of the natural Gryffindor Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy are far apart, coupled with preconceived notions. Harry, who already considers Ron a friend, naturally cannot tolerate Draco's insults to his friend. Harry, who had few friends since childhood, took his first friend very seriously. Although Draco Malfoy pretended to be mature, he was an 11-year-old boy after all, and he was so squeezed by Harry that he was embarrassed to get off the stage on the spot. Fortunately, a professor with a serious temperament and curly buns and dark green robes walked out of the auditorium, and she just swept her eyes to silence the noisy little wizards. Draco Malfoy also stepped aside, cherishing this hard-won step. Hello first-year students, and welcome to Hogwarts. The old professor looked at the young wizards and said, I am the Vice-Chancellor of Hogwarts, and you can call me Professor McGonagall. She noticed the little wizards who were embarrassed by the rain, so she waved her wand and instantly dried the little wizards' damp clothes. She is Minerva McGonagall, the vice principal who wrote to us. Hermione whispered in Lewis's ear, she looks so serious, but it's amazing, and this magic is magical. Lewis nodded impassively, saying in his heart that you still don't know that the serious professor will turn into a cat. In a few moments, you'll have to change the gates and go to the auditorium to gather with the other grade students, but before that, you'll have a sorting test to divide your house. Professor McGonagall said, there are Gryffindors, Ravenclaws, Slytherins, and Hufflepuffs. Speaking of this, Professor McGonagall paused and looked at each of the little wizards' expressions. During this time, the school is your home, and your actions will also affect your academy. If you perform well, you will get extra points, and if you perform badly and violate the school rules, you will be deducted points at the end of the semester. The house with the highest score receives the house cup, and the house flag is hung everywhere in the auditorium. After making sure everyone heard her, Professor McGonagall nodded. Let's go, I'll take you inside. The doors of the auditorium were pushed open, and 4 long tables stretched almost from the main entrance of the auditorium to the end of the auditorium, on which sat students from 4 faculties, surrounded by faculty seats on which sat professors of the school's curriculum. Quilinus Quirrell, with a turban on his head, was among them. There are countless white candles floating in the sky that will never burn out, and the clouds on the ceiling are as thick as the weather outside. That's not the real sky, and although they look exactly the same, they are changes made by magic. Hermione said to Lewis, oh well, I think you should have seen that in that book too. Yes, but I'm glad to have a beautiful lady answer for me. Lewis laughed. In the 4 academy positions, the old students looked at the new students with ill will, especially paying attention to the expressions of the new students whispering in each other's ears with mischievous expressions on their faces. Hogwarts has an unwritten tradition that there is no one to record and disseminate the true process of the sorting ceremony. This is how generations of Hogwarts people have given their new students a wonderful, but not very popular surprise. They would deceive their younger siblings, sons, and daughters, and record specious sorting ceremonies in some books, including but not limited to, gladiatorial battles with fire dragons, complex magic exams, expulsion of living corpses, etc. No one knows who initiated this tradition, but later people did not want it to disappear. Their general idea is, it is too much of a loss to only be fooled by themselves and not to see others being fooled. However, in reality, all of the above is nonsense. There are no fire dragons and no living corpses during the sorting ceremony, only a grey hat sitting on a high chair singing ugly ballads. Professor McGonagall walked over and patted the hat to remind it to restrain a little, then she picked up the hat and looked at the worried little wizards. Now the classmate whose name I read sits down in a chair, and then the sorting hat will assign everyone to the appropriate house. First one, Hannah Abbott. A girl trembled after being called her name, trembled and walked over and sat on a high chair. Professor McGonagall's expression was a little nervous as she put her hat on her head. A child of integrity, said the sorting hat, Hufflepuff. The long tables belonging to Hufflepuff burst into cheers, cheering to welcome the new students to their house. It turns out that this is the sorting ceremony, and it's not at all like the difficult magic test mentioned in that book. Hermione grumbled. Lewis nodded and said, look around, the eyes of those old students. I suspect that this matter has something to do with them and the former Hogwarts students, who deliberately want to see us ugly. It's excessive. Hermione muttered disapprovingly. It's tradition, it's not that they don't welcome us. Don't you see they also cheer after the freshmen are assigned to their own house? Lewis pointed to them and said. Episode 29, the sorting ceremony continues, and a young wizard walks up and finds his own suitable house with the help of the sorting hat. Soon, Professor McGonagall called Hermione's name. Hermione Granger. Professor McGonagall looked at the list and read. Hermione walked over and sat down in a high chair, the sorting hat falling on her head. Oh, a bright and brave little girl, the sorting hat twisted the tip of its own hat. I can feel your hesitation. Is there an academy you want to go to? Ravenclaw. Hermione looked at Lewis and said without hesitation. Well, very firm answer, the sorting hat approves, then Ravenclaw. Hermione excitedly jumped out of her high chair and waved at Lewis, running to the Ravenclaw table. I'm waiting for you in Ravenclaw. Hermione said as she passed by Lewis, you must be such a smart Ravenclaw too. With that she ran to the Ravenclaw table. Lewis didn't pay attention to what Hermione said, he paid attention to the system's prompts, which sounded at the same time as Hermione was announced to be assigned to Ravenclaw. Fate disturbance detected, established fate changes, perturbation intensity, weak, requires some twists and turns and some trivial coincidences to correct. You get reward, destiny points 4 points, current destiny points, 5 points. Sure enough, persuading Hermione to Ravenclaw House can indeed generate a lot of destiny points, but the number is not too much. After all, Hermione is always located in Hogwarts, and sooner or later she will have contact with the legendary savior. Mr. Wilson? Mr. Wilson? The serious voice continuously shouted Lewis's name, which awakened the brooding Lewis, and he looked up to find that at some point the other little wizards had already left his academy, and he was the only one standing here stupidly. And Harry Potter and Ron did get to Gryffindor as they were, sitting happily at the long table chatting at this time. The atmosphere should be very lively when the name of Harry Potter was just read, but Lewis was distracted and didn't notice it at all. Mr. Wilson, it's up to you. Professor McGonagall was a little angry, it was the first time she had seen the little wizard wandering during the sorting ceremony. I'm sorry, Professor McGonagall. Lewis knew that making a mistake meant apologizing. I was distracted. It's okay, but I hope you don't get distracted when you go to class in the future. Professor McGonagall said, now come here and see which house she will be. She was so impressed with Lewis's name. Hogwarts had been around for hundreds of years, and it was the first time that students had been missed. Also because it was a later reissued admission letter, his name is last on the list of the sorting school. Hey, Miss Granger, is that handsome boy your boyfriend? At the Ravenclaw long table, the senior sister sitting next to Hermione couldn't help but quip when she saw Hermione staring at Lewis. No, it's not, we're just friends, and I think he's smart too. Hermione explained calmly, not enough, maybe I'll try to engage with him later. Then you have to seize the opportunity, smart and attractive boys are rare. Senpai said with a smile. If I wanted to, I wouldn't lose to anyone else. Hermione raised her head haughtily, revealing her long, fair neck. Lewis sat in the high chair and frowned as Professor McGonagall placed the sorting hat over his head. Hee hee, don't worry, I'm not dirty. The insightful sorting hat immediately said. I don't know if you're dirty or not, but you certainly haven't showered since you were conscious. Lewis shrugged his shoulders. Let's go, Mr. Sorting Hat, where are you going for me to go? To be honest, I can't see through you completely, but judging by those Linfong claws, you're a good fit for Gryffindor, and you're even a step away from Azkaban. The Sorting Hat said faintly. Listen to you, are most of the Gryffindor students going to be caught in Azkaban? Lewis was amused. If the law is changed to school rules, 2/3 of them will have to go in. The Sorting Hat twisted the tip of its hat and said, okay, the small talk ends here, choose your house. It is more appropriate for a small wizard like you to choose yourself, except for Slytherin. After all, you come from a Muggle family, and it is not very friendly to you, but I just like difficult challenges. Lewis smiled. Please sort me into Slytherin, thank you. Sure. There is no precedent for transfer to Hogwarts, and if you choose Slytherin you will be there for 7 years, which will probably make your 7 years difficult. If they have the ability, I don't care. Lewis touched the top hat in his hand, but they have to pay attention to my counterattack. Sharp answer. The Sorting Hat nodded its tip. So, Slytherin. As soon as the words fell, the unknown Slytherins erupted in cheers, not knowing what they were welcome, let alone what such a thing would bring them. Episode 30. With a smiling expression, Lewis walked up to the long table that belonged to the Slytherin and greeted the people around him. Coincidentally, he was right next to the blonde Sundara teenager Draco Malfoy and his henchman. Hello, my name is Lewis Wilson. Lewis said hello. Draco looked at Lewis with a scrutinizing gaze. Wilson? I haven't heard of this surname, but forget it, if you are clever, I can't treat you as a little brother. Saying that, he pointed to the attendant beside him. They are Crabbe and Goyle. The little thing is quite arrogant. Lewis smiled and didn't know if it was okay. At the end of the sorting house, the legendary wizard Albus Dumbledore got up to announce the start of the banquet. His pure white beard and hair were very luxuriant, which also made him look very kind. At the same time, his temperament is also very perfect, in line with most people's fantasies about reliable old wizards. As his voice fell, a large slice of food immediately appeared on the empty long table. Oily roast chicken, tender steak drumsticks, and all kinds of desserts are piled up in front of the little wizards. This scene can be said to be extremely dreamy, even if Lewis already has extraordinary power, but when he sees this scene, he also feels the magic of magic. Well, although it looks like it grows directly, the food can't be changed, it's just teleportation. Lewis was about to insert a piece of steak into his plate when he looked up to see Hermione's resentful gaze. It seems that his choice made Miss Granger particularly unhappy. Hermione sat at the Ravenclaw table and watched Lewis walk up to the next door and glare at him in a huff, even though Lewis had an apologetic smile. In addition to Hermione, there were people who were surprised by Lewis's choice. Neville Longbottom, the little wizard who had been assigned to Gryffindor, as he was stunned as he walked towards the Slytherin table. Lewis suddenly felt that this magician was even more Gryffindor than Gryffindor. He didn't know the sentence that the mountain had a tiger biased towards the Tiger Mountain, but he could empathize and feel the courageous spirit of the brave to face challenges. In addition to the two little wizards who were sitting in the same carriage as Lewis, one also noticed Lewis. He's actually going to Slytherin. Harry nudged Ron, who was nibbling on a chicken leg in surprise, pointed to Lewis, who was sitting down, and asked, "Didn't you say that Slytherins are pure-blooded bad wizards?" "That's right, that Wilson must be such a bad wizard. Even if he is not now, he will be in the future." Ron Weasley vowed. "But he's a Muggle wizard, and he and I are neighbors, and we live across from my uncle's house." Harry said. He almost missed admission, but fortunately he found Hagrid, who came to pick me up. What? It couldn't be. How could a Muggle wizard possibly be sorted into Slytherin? Ron exclaimed. He didn't pay attention to his volume, so much so that the surrounding Gryffindors heard the exclamation. Beside him are older twins with the same red hair as him. What? That last student to go to Slytherin was a Muggle wizard? Oh. God, this must be a nightmare for him, the twins sang and harmonized, expressing their regret over what had happened to the Muggle wizard. They are Ron Weasley's brother, twins who entered school 2 years early, a pair of mischievous and prop-making geniuses, George Weasley and Fred Weasley. Unfortunately, both their brother and parents thought they were troublemakers, like Percy Weasley, who was sitting in the middle of the long table, in the prefect's seat, staring at the screaming twins, with a warning in his eyes. "Oh my God, George, I feel like I've learned to Dementor, and you don't look like Percy is saying, I'm going to tell Mom," Fred exclaimed in surprise. "That's right, it's not just you, and I feel that I have learned it too." George burst out laughing. There were no secrets to Gryffindor, and soon the news that Lewis Wilson was a Muggle wizard reached every Gryffindor's ear like wings, and then spread like a plague to the next table. Then the news went around and around in Hermione's ears. Hermione jerked her head up and looked at her classmates who were discussing, beside her, Lewis is a Muggle wizard. "I mean, who told you the news? I see it's all over there, and it's all already reached Slytherin." The little wizard pointed to the long Slytherin table. "Oh my God, this is a disaster." Hermione looked at Lewis worriedly. She originally thought of hiding his family for Lewis, at least until he made friends, but she didn't expect that just after the sorting, Lewis's old bottom was exploded. Will this cause him anything bad? He won't be bullied, right? Even if he is a magician, how can he face the hostility of a group of wizards? Hermione thought worriedly.